The first strike. The galaxy was in chaos. The Krull Empire, a ruthless and merciless race, had spread destruction across countless star systems. Their fleet of dreadnoughts, towering behemoths of steel and plasma, obliterated everything in their path. No species had been able to stand against them for long. Planets fell like dominoes, leaving the United Galactic Alliance, UGA, scrambling for survival. In the middle of this darkness, Commander Threx of the UGA stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Starfire. His crew was exhausted, their faces pale and their movements sluggish. The latest reports showed another 3 planets lost to the Krull. Morale was at an all-time low. "Sir," a junior officer spoke, breaking the heavy silence. "Enemy dreadnoughts are approaching our position. Estimated time to arrival: 10 minutes. Threx clenched his fists. They had nowhere to run. The UGA fleet was battered and scattered. Their current outpost, a small station near the edge of the Krillian Nebula, was their only line of defense. If the Krull broke through, dozens of allied systems would be left defenseless. "Prepare for battle," Threx ordered. His voice was steady, but deep down, he knew this might be their last stand. As the crew moved into action, a strange signal appeared on the ship's radar. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the void. Then it grew stronger, a series of encoded messages in a language long forgotten by the galaxy. "Commander," the radar officer said, puzzled, "we're picking up an unknown fleet approaching from Sector 9. No identification codes. They're human." Threx froze. Humans. He hadn't heard that word in years. Humanity had been considered a primitive and isolated species, too aggressive to be part of the UGA. Their disappearance centuries ago had been a relief to most alien races. Now, they were suddenly here. "Are you sure?" Threx asked, his eyes narrowing. "Positive, sir. They're broadcasting an old Terran code." Before Threx could process the information, the view screen lit up with an incoming transmission. A stern human face appeared. The woman had piercing blue eyes and a calm but commanding presence. Behind her, the bridge of her ship buzzed with disciplined activity. "This is Captain Rhea Carter of the Terran fleet," the woman said. Her voice was sharp and confident. "Hold your position. Reinforcements have arrived." Threx stared at the screen in disbelief. "Reinforcements? What reinforcements?" "You're humans. Where have you been all this time?" Carter's expression didn't waver. "Surviving. Preparing. And now we're here to end this war." The transmission cut off before Threx could ask more questions. The UGA officers exchanged nervous glances. They had no idea what to expect from these long-lost humans. Moments later, the human fleet appeared on the radar. Their ships were sleek and menacing, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Each one was black as midnight, with glowing blue thrusters that left streaks of light in their wake. They moved with precision, forming a perfect battle formation as they advanced toward the Krull. "Commander," the tactical officer reported, "the human fleet is engaging the Krull dreadnoughts. Their weapons, I've never seen firepower like this before." On the view screen, the battle unfolded. The Krull, overconfident and slow to adapt, were caught off guard. The human warships unleashed a barrage of plasma beams and missile strikes, tearing through the Krull's defenses with terrifying efficiency. The Krull dreadnoughts, once considered invincible, exploded one by one. The UGA crew watched in stunned silence. The humans fought with a ruthless precision that left no room for error. They didn't just defeat the Krull, they annihilated them. "Sir," the radar officer said, "the Krull fleet is retreating. The humans, they've won." Threx couldn't believe it. The UGA had been fighting the Krull for years, suffering defeat after defeat. And now, in a matter of minutes, the humans had turned the tide. The Indomitable, the human flagship, sent another transmission. Captain Carter's face appeared on the screen once more. "Commander Threx," she said, "the Krull are on the run. But they'll be back. We need to discuss our next move." Humanity has been watching this war from the shadows, but now it's time to act. Together, we can end this once and for all. Threx hesitated. Trusting humans was a gamble, but what choice did they have? The UGA was out of options, and the humans had just proven themselves to be the galaxy's most powerful force. "Very well, Captain Carter," Threx said. "Let's talk. But I warn you, if you're here to take control, we won't stand for it." Carter's lips curved into a faint smile. "We're not here to take control, Commander. We're here to save the galaxy. And trust me, you're going to need us." As the transmission ended, Threx felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. The humans were back, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that their return came with a price the UGA might not be ready to pay. The stage was set, the humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The unlikely allies. The Indomitable hovered above the battered UGA fleet like a black leviathan, its hull gleaming ominously against the distant starlight. Within its command center, Captain Rhea Carter stood tall, her hands clasped behind her back, as she studied the incoming data. Around her, the human crew operated with an eerie calmness, their movements precise, their voices measured. "Message from the UGA flagship, Starfire," said a young officer at the comm station. "They're requesting a formal meeting, Captain." Carter nodded. "Open a channel." The view screen flickered to life, revealing Commander Threx. His alien features, pale blue skin and ridged forehead, betrayed his unease. Behind him, the UGA crew appeared just as wary, their eyes darting nervously as they tried to comprehend the sudden arrival of humanity. "Captain Carter," Threx began, his tone cautious. "On behalf of the United Galactic Alliance, I want to thank you for your intervention. Without it, we would have been annihilated." Carter's expression remained neutral. "You're welcome, Commander. But let's not waste time with pleasantries. The Crawl are regrouping as we speak, and they'll strike harder next time." Threx hesitated, then said, "We've heard stories about your kind. Once, humans were part of the galactic community. Then you vanished. Why?" Carter's gaze hardened. "We didn't vanish. We withdrew. When the UGA decided humanity was too aggressive, too unpredictable, you left us no choice but to retreat to the Sol system. We chose survival over politics." Threx frowned. "And now you return, with warships unlike anything we've seen. How did you build such power in isolation?" Carter allowed herself a small smile. "Humanity adapts, Commander. We learned from our mistakes. We focused on what we do best: innovation, resilience, and survival. Our warships are powered by hybrid AI systems that combine human intuition with machine precision, and they're built for one purpose: to win." The UGA crew on the Starfire exchanged uneasy glances. For centuries, the galaxy had operated without humanity, and now their sudden reemergence was as intimidating as it was miraculous. "I hope this purpose aligns with ours," Threx said. "We're fighting for the survival of all species, not just humanity." "We understand that," Carter replied. "But let me be clear. We won't sit back and let bureaucratic indecision slow us down. If the UGA wants our help, you'll need to follow our lead." Threx bristled. "That sounds dangerously close to a demand." "It's a reality check," Carter said firmly. "The Crawl don't negotiate. They don't compromise. If you want to win this war, you need us, and we need full operational freedom." Threx's jaw tightened. He knew Carter was right. The UGA had been losing ground for years, bogged down by endless debates and hesitant strategies. The humans had already proven their worth in battle, but could they be trusted? Before he could respond, an alert blared on the Indomitable. Carter turned to her tactical officer. "What is it?" "Crawl reconnaissance ships detected in the sector," the officer reported. "They're likely scouting for a counteroffensive." Carter faced the view screen again. "Commander Threx, This isn't the time for politics. We have an enemy to crush. Are you with us or not? Threx took a deep breath. The decision felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, but he knew there was only one answer. Very well, Captain Carter, he said. The UGA fleet will follow your lead, for now. Wise choice, Carter said, her tone carrying a hint of approval. Prepare your ships. We'll intercept the Crawl scouts before they can report back. This is our chance to send a message. The rules of this war have changed. As the channel closed, Threx turned to his crew. I don't trust them, he admitted, but their firepower speaks for itself. Stay alert. Humanity has always been unpredictable. Aboard the Indomitable, Carter addressed her officers. The UGA is fragile, and they'll crack under pressure if we don't guide them. We need to show them what we're capable of, and fast. Her first officer, Commander Arlen Drake, spoke up. And what happens if they turn on us, Captain? You know how the galaxy views humans. Carter's eyes narrowed. If they turn on us, they'll learn the same lesson the Crawl are about to learn. The battle against the Crawl reconnaissance fleet was swift and brutal. The human warships moved like predators, cutting through the enemy with calculated precision. The UGA ships followed hesitantly at first, but as they witnessed the humans' tactics, their confidence grew. On the Starfire, Threx watched in awe as the Indomitable executed a daring maneuver, using its advanced cloaking system to flank the Crawl ships and destroy their command vessel in a single devastating strike. When the last Crawl ship was obliterated, the battlefield fell silent. The UGA fleet had survived another day, but the true war was just beginning. Back on the Indomitable, Carter reviewed the battle logs. The Crawl were predictable, but she knew it wouldn't last. The enemy would adapt. The question wasn't if, but when. As she stared at the starlit void, a single thought echoed in her mind. The galaxy isn't ready for what's coming, but we are. The stage was set for a new alliance, one forged in fire and bound by necessity. Whether it would endure or shatter under the weight of humanity's return remained to be seen. The Battle of Titan's Rift. Titan's Rift was a swirling expanse of chaos, a narrow corridor of jagged asteroid fields and unpredictable gravitational anomalies. It was the perfect choke point for an ambush, and the Crawl knew it. For years, the rift had been a natural barrier, separating the UGA's core systems from the Crawl's relentless advances. Today, it would become a battlefield. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Rhea Carter studied the holographic map projected before her. The Crawl fleet was converging on their position, their dreadnoughts forming an impenetrable wall of destruction. Behind her, the UGA fleet hovered nervously, their ships battered and outclassed. Status report, Carter said, her voice steady. Commander Arlen Drake leaned over the tactical console. We've got 20 confirmed Crawl ships, 5 dreadnoughts, 15 escorts. They're using the rift's terrain to shield their flanks. It's a textbook trap. Carter nodded. Good. Let them think we've walked right into it. The comms officer turned. Incoming transmission from Commander Threx. Put him through, Carter ordered. The view screen flickered to reveal Threx, his expression tense. Captain Carter, are you seeing this? The Crawl have the high ground. We should retreat and regroup. Retreat. Carter raised an eyebrow. If we back down now, they'll push straight into UGA space. Your people can't afford another defeat. And we can't afford to lose our entire fleet, Threx shot back. This is suicide. Carter leaned forward, her gaze piercing. This isn't suicide. This is strategy. Stay in formation, Commander. You'll see. Threx hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. Fine. But if this fails, the blood is on your hands. Carter didn't respond. Instead, she turned to her crew. All ships, prepare for engagement. Activate maneuver Delta 12. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. The battle began with a blinding flash. The Crawl unleashed their long-range plasma cannons, lighting up the void with deadly arcs of energy. UGA ships scrambled to evade, their shields struggling to absorb the onslaught. But the human fleet didn't flinch. The Indomitable led the charge, its black hull shimmering as it activated its adaptive cloaking system. The other human warships followed suit, disappearing from the battlefield like phantoms. The Crawl hesitated, their sensors scrambling to locate the vanished fleet. Then, chaos erupted. The human ships reappeared in precise, calculated positions, emerging from the asteroid field at impossible angles. Their plasma lances and kinetic torpedoes struck with surgical precision, targeting the Crawl's engines and weapon systems. Dreadnoughts that had once seemed invincible began to crumble under the relentless assault. On the Starfire, Threx and his crew watched in stunned silence. The humans weren't just fighting. They were dismantling the Crawl fleet with a cold, calculated efficiency that bordered on terrifying. "How are they doing this?" Threx muttered, his voice barely audible. "They're using the terrain," one of his officers whispered. "The asteroids. They're treating them like cover. And their firepower," another added. It's unnatural." Inside the Indomitable, Carter monitored the battle with razor-sharp focus. The Crawl were adapting faster than expected, their dreadnoughts reorganizing into a defensive formation. But it was too late. The human fleet was already inside their perimeter. "Target their command vessel," Carter ordered. "Cut off the head, and the body will fall." The Indomitable surged forward, its railguns charging with an audible hum. The Crawl command dreadnought loomed ahead, its massive hull bristling with weapons. The two ships clashed in a ferocious exchange of firepower, the void igniting with explosions. The Indomitable took a direct hit to its side, the impact sending a tremor through the ship. Sparks flew across the bridge, but Carter didn't flinch. "Damage report," she barked. "Shields down to 60%, Drake replied. "Hull integrity holding." "Good. Maintain fire." The human flagship pressed its assault, maneuvering with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size. Finally, its railguns fired a concentrated salvo, piercing the Crawl dreadnought's core. The massive ship exploded in a fiery cascade, debris scattering into the rift. The remaining Crawl ships faltered, their formation collapsing without their command. The human fleet capitalized on the chaos, driving the enemy into retreat. Within minutes, the battle was over. On the Starfire, Threx could only stare at the aftermath. The Crawl were gone, and the humans hadn't lost a single ship. A transmission from the Indomitable appeared on his screen. Carter's face was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. "The rift is secure," she said. "The Crawl won't be bothering you here again." Threx struggled to find words. "That was remarkable. I've never seen tactics like that before." "That's because you've never fought like us," Carter replied. "The Crawl are predictable. They rely on brute force. We use strategy, creativity, and precision. That's how you win wars." Threx nodded slowly. "Perhaps there's more to humanity than I thought." Carter's lips curved into a faint smile. "You've only seen the beginning, Commander. The Crawl are relentless, but so are we. This is just the first step." As the transmission ended, Threx turned to his crew. "Keep a close eye on them," he said. "They may have saved us, but they're still human. And humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." In the vast emptiness of Titan's Rift, the UGA fleet regrouped, their spirits lifted for the first time in years. But as the humans prepared for their next move, one thing became clear: the galaxy had underestimated them. And the Crawl were about to pay the price. The cost of victory. The aftermath of the Battle of Titan's Rift rippled across the galaxy. For the first time in years, the Crawl were on the defensive, and whispers of humanity's return spread like wildfire. On UGA planets, civilians celebrated, while military leaders held tense meetings, trying to reconcile their gratitude with their growing unease. Aboard the Starfire, Commander Threx paced the bridge, his mind troubled. The humans had saved them, but at what cost? Reports of the battle described human warships prioritizing destruction over protection. Collateral damage had been ignored, with stray shots obliterating nearby asteroids that harbored small mining colonies. "Commander," said an officer, interrupting his thoughts, "a delegation from the Indomitable has arrived. Captain Carter insists on a face-to-face meeting." Threx sighed. "Prepare the conference room." The room was stark, with cold metal walls and a single long table in the center. Captain Rhea Carter entered flanked by two of her officers, their crisp uniforms contrasting sharply with the more utilitarian attire of the UGA delegation. Carter's presence filled the room, her calm demeanor exuding authority. "Commander Threx," Carter began, taking the seat, "thank you for agreeing to meet. We have much to discuss." "Do we?" Threx replied, his tone sharp. "Your methods at Titan's Rift were effective, but reckless. Civilians died because of your calculated precision." Carter didn't flinch. "War isn't clean, Commander. You should know that by now. Every second we hesitated, the Crawl would have pressed their advantage. Lives were lost, yes, but millions more were saved." "That's easy to say when it's not your people on the line," Threx countered. Carter leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "And what would you have done? Retreat? Sacrifice more planets while you debated morality in a council chamber? The Crawl don't wait for your ethics. They destroy, they enslave, and they conquer. If you want to beat them, you have to be willing to make hard choices." The room fell silent. Threx's officers shifted uncomfortably, while Carter sat stoically, their loyalty to their captain unwavering. Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, the ship's AI, designated Erebus, ran a detailed analysis of the battle. Erebus wasn't just an artificial intelligence. It was the heart of the ship, a hybrid construct of human ingenuity and machine learning. "Captain," came Erebus's disembodied voice through the conference room speakers. Carter glanced at the ceiling. "Go ahead." Analysis of Crawl fleet movements suggests they're regrouping near the Vexor Nebula. Probability of an immediate counterstrike, 87%. Threx frowned. "The Vexor Nebula is dangerously close to the Sol system. You're risking Earth itself by provoking them." Carter's expression darkened. "Earth can handle itself. We've been preparing for centuries, Commander. Let the Crawl come. We'll be ready." "You talk as if Earth is invincible," Threx said. "But no planet is truly safe. If the Crawl turn their full might on your homeworld, can you stop them?" Carter's jaw tightened. "We have contingency plans for everything. Earth isn't just a planet. It's an idea. And ideas are harder to kill than people." After the meeting, Threx returned to the bridge of the Starfire, his thoughts racing. The humans were unlike any species he had encountered. They weren't just warriors. They were strategists, innovators, and survivors. But their willingness to sacrifice made him uneasy. "Do you trust them, Commander?" one of his officers asked. Threx shook his head. "I don't trust anyone who views war as a numbers game. They may be allies now, but their methods could destroy everything we stand for." In a secure chamber deep within the Indomitable, Carter met privately with her first officer, Commander Drake. "They're afraid of us," Drake said. "They should be," Carter replied. "Fear is a powerful motivator. It keeps people in line. It pushes them to act when they'd otherwise hesitate." Drake frowned. "But how long can we keep this alliance together? The UGA won't tolerate our methods forever." "We don't need their tolerance," Carter said. "We need their ships and their manpower. Once the Crawl are defeated, we'll deal with the fallout, one war at a time." The Crawl, meanwhile, were far from beaten. Deep in the Vexor Nebula, Supreme Commander Vorth stood before his tactical display, watching recordings of the Battle of Titan's Rift. The human ships moved with unnerving speed, their attacks precise and devastating. "Humans," Vorth growled, his claws curling into fists. "We thought them extinct, and yet they rise from the shadows. Should we increase the assault on the UGA?" one of his advisors asked. "No," Vorth said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Forget the UGA. We'll target the humans directly, destroy their home, and their fleet will crumble. Prepare the invasion force. Earth will burn." As the Krall's plans took shape, Carter stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring out at the endless stars. She knew the war was far from over. The Krall would come for Earth. It was only a matter of time. "Erebus," Carter said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Yes, Captain," the eye replied. "Prepare the fleet. If the Krall want Earth, we'll give them a welcome they'll never forget." The cost of victory weighed heavily on her shoulders, but Carter knew one thing for certain. Humanity would fight, no matter the price. The galaxy might not understand humanity's methods, but soon enough, everyone, friend and foe alike, would know one truth: humans were unstoppable. The homefront threat. The Krall invasion force emerged from the shadows of the Vexor Nebula, their warships spreading across space like a plague. Their destination, Earth. For centuries, the Sol system had been a mystery to the galaxy, hidden behind impenetrable defenses and shrouded in secrecy. Now, it would become a battlefield. On Earth, life had carried on beneath a veil of preparation. Cities gleamed with futuristic architecture, but every building was fortified. Beneath the surface, vast bunkers housed civilians, while orbital platforms bristled with weapons aimed at the stars. In the Sol Defense Command Center, Admiral Eleanor Hayes stood at a massive tactical display, her sharp eyes scanning the incoming data. Her crew worked feverishly, updating projections and relaying messages to the fleet. "Admiral," a lieutenant called, his voice tight, "we've detected Krall ships breaching the outer perimeter. Estimated time to planetary range, 3 hours." Hayes's expression hardened. "Activate planetary shields and scramble all surface defenses, and get me Captain Carter." Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Rhea Carter received the transmission with a grim nod. The human fleet was already mobilizing, their warships forming a defensive line near Mars. The crew worked with quiet intensity, their trust in Carter unshakable. "Erebus," Carter said, addressing the AI. "What's the status of our planetary defenses?" "Shields are at full capacity," Erebus replied. "Orbital platforms are operational, but they will not withstand sustained bombardment from a fleet of this size." Carter exhaled slowly. She knew the Krall wouldn't hold back. This wasn't just an invasion, it was an extermination. The first wave of the Krall attack came with terrifying speed. Their ships unleashed a barrage of plasma cannons, hammering Earth's orbital defenses. Platforms exploded in fiery bursts, sending debris scattering across the void. On the Indomitable, Carter watched the chaos unfold. "Deploy flanking squadrons," she ordered. "Draw their fire away from the planet." The human warships moved like predators, weaving through the Krall fleet with deadly precision. They targeted the Krall's larger ships, aiming for their engines and command centers. But for every Krall ship destroyed, more seemed to appear. "We're outnumbered," Drake said, his voice low. "Even with our firepower, we can't hold them off forever." "We don't need forever," Carter replied. "We just need to buy time." On Earth's surface, civilians crowded into bunkers, their faces pale with fear. Children clung to their parents as distant explosions shook the ground. Above them, the sky was a patchwork of burning wreckage and glowing plasma fire. In one of the underground bunkers, a young boy named Liam stared at a holographic screen showing the battle in real time. His mother tried to pull him away, but he resisted. "Why are they attacking us?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. "Because they're afraid of what we can do," the voice said from behind them. They turned to see an old soldier, his face lined with scars. He crouched down to Liam's level. "The Krall think they can break us, but they don't understand what it means to be human." Back in orbit, the Indomitable took a direct hit, the impact rocking the ship violently. Sparks flew from the consoles, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Shields down to 30%, an officer reported. Divert power from non-essential systems, Carter commanded. Keep us in the fight. As the battle raged, a new signal emerged from the far side of the moon. It was faint at first, barely detectable. But then it grew stronger, a pulsating beacon that sent shockwaves through the Krull fleet. "Captain," Erebus said, "we're detecting an activation signal from Lunar Base Theta." Carter's eyes widened. "Theta? That project was decommissioned decades ago." "Apparently not," Erebus replied. "The signal is broadcasting a single message. Operation Valkyrie, it's online." Drake turned to Carter, confusion written on his face. "What's Valkyrie?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the tactical display, where the Krull ships were beginning to falter. "It's something we were never supposed to use." From beneath the moon's surface, enormous panels slid open, revealing the hidden installation. A massive orbital cannon emerged, its barrel glowing with an eerie blue light. Powered by an experimental fusion core, it had the capacity to destroy entire fleets with a single shot. The cannon fired, and the battlefield lit up like a supernova. The energy beam tore through the Krull formation, vaporizing dozens of ships in an instant. The sheer power of the weapon sent shockwaves across the battlefield, disrupting the Krull's communications and scattering their forces. On the Starfire, Commander Threx watched in awe. What is that?" Carter's face appeared on his screen. "That, Commander, is humanity's last line of defense." The Krull, caught off guard by the sudden display of firepower, began to retreat. But Carter knew they wouldn't give up so easily. This was only the beginning. "Erebus," Carter said, "prepare a pursuit fleet. We're not letting them regroup." "Understood," the AI replied. However, activating Valkyrie has destabilized the moon's core. Projections indicate significant seismic activity within hours. Drake's eyes widened. "You mean the moon is going to collapse?" Carter nodded grimly. "We'll deal with the fallout later. Right now, we end this." As the human fleet regrouped, Carter stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the retreating Krull ships. The cost of activating Valkyrie was immense, but it had saved Earth, for now. "Captain," Drake said quietly, "was it worth it?" Carter didn't answer immediately. She watched as the debris of the battle drifted across the void, a grim reminder of the price of survival. "Ask me when the war is over," she said finally. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Humanity had shown its hand, but the Krull would return, stronger and more determined. And when they did, Earth would be waiting. The final gambit. The remains of the Krull fleet limped back to their stronghold, but their defeat at Earth had only emboldened their resolve. Supreme Commander Vorth stood in his war chamber, surrounded by his advisors and tactical holograms. The destruction of their forces at Titan's Rift and the unexpected weapon from Earth had shaken the Krull, but not broken them. "We underestimated the humans," Vorth growled, his voice like grinding metal. "No more mistakes. Earth will burn, even if we have to sacrifice every ship in the fleet. Assemble the armée." On Earth, the activation of Operation Valkyrie had left scars, both physical and political. The moon's core was destabilizing, causing tremors and disruptions to Earth's tidal systems. Massive waves battered coastal cities, and scientists scrambled to predict the long-term consequences. In the Seoul Defense Command Center, Admiral Hayes stood before a council of Earth's leaders. The atmosphere was tense, and accusations flew. "You jeopardized the moon's stability," one representative shouted. "If the moon collapses, it could destroy Earth's ecosystem entirely." Admiral Hayes' expression was hard. "And if we hadn't used Valkyrie, Earth would already be a smoldering ruin. The Krull would have annihilated us." Before the argument could escalate further, a transmission interrupted the meeting. It was Captain Rhea Carter aboard the Indomitable. "We don't have time for debates," Carter said bluntly. "The Krull are regrouping. They've called in their entire armada. This is their endgame." The council fell silent. "How long do we have?" Hayes asked. "Not long," Carter replied. Erebus estimates their fleet will arrive in less than 12 hours. And this time, they're not coming to fight. They're coming to obliterate. In orbit, the human fleet prepared for what would likely be its final stand. Engineers worked around the clock to repair damage from the previous battle, while soldiers ran drills, their faces set with grim determination. On the Indomitable, Carter and her officers reviewed their options. The fleet was strong, but it wasn't enough to take on the Krull Armada head-on. "We can't hold them off forever," Drake said. "Even with Valkyrie, their numbers are overwhelming." Carter nodded. "That's why we won't fight them on their terms. We're taking the battle to them." Drake frowned. "To the Krull's homeworld." "No," Carter said, a spark of determination in her eyes. "To their flagship." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Krull's flagship, the Eclipse, was the nerve center of their entire fleet. It was heavily guarded, nearly impenetrable. But if it were destroyed, the Krull's command structure would collapse. "How do we get past their defenses?" Drake asked. "We don't," Carter said. "We go through them." The plan was simple in concept but suicidal in execution. The human fleet would launch a full frontal assault on the Krull Armada, drawing their attention while a small strike team infiltrated the Eclipse. The target, Supreme Commander Vorth himself. "Erebus," Carter said, addressing the AI. "Calculate our odds." "Success probability, 14%. Erebus replied. "Failure will result in total annihilation of the fleet and planetary systems." Drake raised an eyebrow. "Reassuring." Carter smirked. "I've beaten worse odds." As the Krull Armada approached, Earth's defenses braced for impact. The moon's seismic instability worsened, with cracks forming across its surface. Scientists warned that another major energy discharge could shatter it completely, but there was no choice. Valkyrie would fire again if necessary. When the Krull fleet finally arrived, it was a terrifying sight. Thousands of ships filled the void, their engines glowing like malevolent stars. At the center was the Eclipse, a fortress of unimaginable size, bristling with weaponry. The battle began with a deafening roar. Human and UGA ships surged forward, their weapons lighting up the darkness. The Krull responded with overwhelming firepower, turning the battlefield into a chaotic storm of explosions and debris. Amidst the chaos, the Indomitable and a handful of cloaked ships broke formation, slipping through the Krull's lines toward the Eclipse. Their cloaking systems wouldn't hold for long, but they didn't need to. The strike team just needed to get close enough to board. Inside the Eclipse, Vorth watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. "The humans fight bravely," he said, "but bravery alone cannot save them." His confidence was interrupted by an alarm. "Intruders detected on Deck 17. A subordinate reported. Vorth snarled. "Seal off the area. Deploy the guards." Carter and her team moved quickly through the labyrinthine corridors of the Eclipse. They were armed with experimental weapons designed to bypass Krull armor, but the odds were still stacked against them. "Erebus, guide us," Carter said through her comm. "Proceed left," Erebus replied. "The command center is 2 levels above your position." As they advanced, Krull soldiers intercepted them. The corridors erupted into close-quarters combat, plasma bolts and energy blades flashing in the confined space. Carter's team fought with the ferocity of desperation, their every move calculated and precise. When they finally reached the command center, they found Vorth waiting for them. The Krull commander was massive, his armor gleaming with alien technology. His eyes glowed with fury as he stepped forward. "You've come far, humans," Vorth growled. "But this is where your journey ends." Carter raised her weapon, her voice steady. "Not today." The final showdown was brutal. Carter's team fought valiantly, but Vorth's strength and skill were overwhelming. One by one, her team fell, leaving only Carter standing. "You cannot win," Vorth said, raising his blade. Carter smirked, blood running down her face. "I come have to." In her hand was a small device, a remote detonator. While her team had fought, she had planted charges throughout the Eclipse's reactor core. "This is for Earth," she said, pressing the button. The Eclipse exploded in a blinding flash, taking Vorth and a significant portion of the Krull armada with it. The remaining Krull ships, disorganized and leaderless, retreated into the void. On Earth, cheers erupted as the battlefield fell silent. The cost had been immense, but humanity had achieved the impossible. As the debris of the Eclipse drifted through space, Carter's fate remained unknown. The Indomitable's crew scanned the wreckage, hoping for a miracle. "She'll be back," Drake said quietly, his voice filled with both sadness and resolve. "She always comes back." The war wasn't over, but humanity had struck a blow that would be remembered for generations. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth. When pushed to the brink, humans don't just survive. They rise. The price of power. The wreckage of the Krull armada drifted through the silent void, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. The galaxy was still reeling from humanity's audacious strike. Supreme Commander Vorth was dead, his flagship obliterated, and the Krull were in disarray. But victory had come at a cost. On Earth, the moon was dying. Cracks spread across its surface like veins, glowing faintly as the lunar core destabilized. Scientists scrambled to devise solutions, but every calculation ended in the same grim conclusion. The moon was beyond saving. Without it, Earth's tides would spiral out of control, ecosystems would collapse, and humanity's survival would once again hang by a thread. In the Sol Defense Command Center, Admiral Hayes stood before a holographic display of the moon. The cracks widened with every passing hour, each one a reminder of the desperate choice they had made to activate Valkyrie. "Status report," Hayes demanded. A weary scientist shook his head. "The moon has less than 48 hours before total collapse. We can't stop it, but we might be able to mitigate the damage with controlled detonation." "Controlled detonation," Hayes echoed, her voice sharp. "Do you realize what you're suggesting?" The scientist hesitated. "If we don't, Earth will suffer catastrophic gravitational shifts. It's our only option." Aboard the Indomitable, the mood was somber. Captain Rhea Carter had survived the destruction of the Eclipse, her escape pod recovered amidst the wreckage. But her injuries were severe, and she sat in the med bay, her body covered in burns and bandages. Still, her mind was sharp, her focus unyielding. "Erebus," she said weakly, her voice hoarse. "What's the status of the fleet?" "Human and UGA forces are consolidating their positions," the AI replied. "The Krull are retreating to their remaining strongholds. They are fractured and leaderless, but not defeated." "And Earth?" Carter asked, though she already knew the answer. "The moon's destabilization continues. Projected casualties from tidal shifts, 30 to 40% of the global population." Carter closed her eyes. She had always known the cost of war, but hearing the numbers still felt like a dagger to the heart. Options. "Admiral Hayes is considering a controlled detonation to minimize planetary impact," Erebus said. Carter nodded. "Tell her she has my support." In the UGA Council chambers, the mood was jubilant but guarded. Delegates from dozens of species debated humanity's role in the galaxy now that the Krull were broken. "They saved us," one delegate said. "Without the humans, we'd all be enslaved or dead." "They also endangered us," another countered. "Their methods are reckless, their weapons too destructive. They're a danger to us all." The debate raged on until Commander Threx stood to speak. "Enough," he said, his voice commanding the room's attention. "The humans have proven themselves, not just as warriors, but as survivors. They took the risks none of us were willing to take. They paid the price so we wouldn't have to. We owe them more than gratitude. We owe them our loyalty." The chamber fell silent. Threx's words carried weight, and the delegates nodded in reluctant agreement. As the clock ticked down on the moon's collapse, humanity prepared for the worst. Evacuation orders were issued for coastal cities, and the orbital fleet began moving civilians to off-world colonies. It wasn't enough. There were too many people and too little time. In one of the bunkers, young Liam clutched a small stuffed animal as he watched the news. His mother knelt beside him, brushing tears from her eyes. "Will we be okay, Mama?" he asked. She forced a smile. "The heroes are out there, fighting for us. They'll make it right." When the moment came, the detonation of the moon was a spectacle both beautiful and terrifying. Valkyrie, repurposed for its final mission, fired one last shot, fracturing the lunar core into fragments. The explosion lit up the sky, the debris scattering into orbit like a celestial dance. On Earth, the tide surged violently, but the worst had been averted. The destruction was immense, but humanity endured. Weeks later, Captain Carter stood on a platform overlooking the rebuilding efforts on Earth. The scars of the war were everywhere: cities in ruins, families grieving, ecosystems disrupted. But there was also hope. Across the galaxy, species once divided by mistrust were coming together, united by their shared struggle against the Crawl. Admiral Hayes approached, her expression unreadable. "You should be resting." Carter shook her head. "There's too much to do." "You saved us, Rhea," Hayes said quietly. "But at what cost?" Carter stared at the horizon, where the sun was setting behind a shattered skyline. "The cost doesn't matter. What matters is that we're still here. We fought. We survived. And now we rebuild." In the shadows of deep space, the remnants of the Crawl licked their wounds. They were weakened but not destroyed, and whispers of vengeance echoed through their ranks. The galaxy had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Back on Earth, young Liam looked up at the night sky, now dotted with unfamiliar stars. His mother stood beside him, holding his hand. "Where's the moon?" Liam asked. "It's gone, sweetheart," she said softly. "But we're still here. That's what matters." Liam nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "One day, I'm going to be a hero too." Humanity had paid a heavy price for its survival, but it had also proven a truth that echoed across the galaxy. When the darkness rises, humans rise higher. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now it would never forget. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was unstoppable.